If you are over 60, building muscle is so simple. It's not easy necessarily, but it's very, very simple. However, the fitness industry has made it so complicated. They made it so mysterious. They made it appear as though you need to be an expert or you need to be taught by an expert before you can build muscle if you are over 60. In fact, the whole fitness industry is shrouded in complication, sometimes in mystery. Why? Only because if it's made that way, then people over 60 have to kind of think they cannot do it themselves, and they have to hire the so-called gurus. They have to pay expensive gym memberships. They have to hire PAs who are expensive, prima donnas, to be able to achieve fitness. That's the reason why. Now, I'm not discounting joining membership of gyms. I'm not discounting having a PA to assist you. All I'm saying is getting fit over 60, it's so simple that you do not need to overcomplicate it, and most men do. Today, I'm going to go through the simplicity of getting fit, building muscle if you are over 60. I can in fact tell you now, it's as simple as 1, 2, 3. Let's go into it. What do I mean by 1, 2, 3? Simply, all you need is to lift, and we'll go into it in a little bit more. Eat enough protein, we'll delve into that, and recover. And we'll deep dive into that. Lifting. What does that involve? First of all, if you are over 60 and you contact one of the so-called experts, fitness experts, and you ask them for guidance and help to get fit, you will have a complicated program of 17, 18, 20 protocols on how to get fit. They will tell you the latest techniques on how to lift, how to squat, how to do everything. They will describe the so-called newest equipments in the current gyms. Do not buy it. That's overcomplication. That's intended to sell you. That's in fact the biggest friction point for most men over 60 to get fit. Let me tell you here and now on how you can actually get fit by taking away all the mystery, taking away all the complication, and making this simple, and then you can get fit through it. Firstly, let's talk about the so-called splits. You hear about upper-lower splits. You hear about skipping a day. You hear about all sort of programming that talk about the optimal way for somebody to train. For us, you do not need that. If you're a bodybuilder maybe, and you're trying to optimize for the small marginal gains, maybe that matters. But if you're over 60, and all you're trying to do is to grow muscle for longevity, for capability, to ensure that you remain fit and not frail, you do not need complicated, optimal, marginal improvement. You need to keep it simple. You need to reduce the friction. So all you need is full body exercise. You don't need upper, lower. You do not need any complicated program. I will go into it in more detail. I recommend, Everprime recommends, you do full body activation daily. First of all, very simple movements, and then 1 to 2 trainings a week. 1 to 2 trainings, challenging trainings a week. But you do need that full daily mobility, that full daily body activation. I'm going to it in more detail. So you do not need complicated splits. The next thing you hear about is techniques. They tell you you need angling your elbows, you need to twist your arms at the end of a stretch. They complicate the whole thing, and they quote statistics on how you could improve by 1% muscle growth if you twisted your arm that way, or if you sat down this way, or if you leaned a cable that way. All that is supposed to confuse so that you'll be sold. All you need is ensure that you get full stretch when you do your exercise. You get full range of motion, and you make sure you get incremental weights every time you train, progressive overload, and you ensure you do not overtrain. You do not need the fancy techniques. You do not need the fancy latest research on how to twist your arm, on how to twist your elbow, on how to raise your hands overhead. All that is intended to complicate, which would then introduce friction, and therefore you think this is too complicated, and therefore you do not train. What you need is very simple techniques. And the simple techniques are progressive overload, which means you increase the weight to keep your muscle challenged. If you are stretching any part of your body, make sure you go full range of motion. During the eccentrics, make sure you slow down. That's it. Everything else might give you marginal gains, but if you are trying to maintain muscle for longevity, if you are trying to maintain muscle for capability after 60, the last thing you need is the marginal gains that professional bodybuilders are bringing out there for you to need that to be trained. You don't need that at all. That's unless if you're a professional bodybuilder, then I'm not discounting that. Everything I'm saying here is not necessary, does not mean they don't work, does not mean they are not founded in science. All I'm saying is, for a man over 60, that's an overcomplication. That introduces friction. You don't need that at all. So in terms of techniques, you do not need to overcomplicate it. The next thing that you hear about, they tell us that we do need this fancy equipment, or if you go join that fancy gym, they have got the newest equipment. You see magazines, fitness magazines talking about the newest equipment, all scientifically based. Once again, nothing wrong with them. But if you're not a bodybuilder, you do not need the fancy equipment. In fact, Ever Price, my recommendation in this channel is, if you're over 60, you probably for your first 90 days, you do not need to join a gym. Our recommendation is very simple. You get 2 to 3 equipments, probably under $150 or £100 sterling, and you train at home. My recommendation is you get an adjustable dumbbell wherein you can increase your weight as you get fitter, and you get an exercise bench, foldable one, so you can fold it and put it away, and a stationary cycle. That's all you need. And using your adjustable dumbbells, you can do a full body on that, and you can increase the weight, which I talked about earlier for progressive overload. And for your cardio and for keeping your heart rate very high, you can use your stationary cycle. I use that and it delivered wonders, and I'll talk about that towards the end of the video. So again, you do not need expensive, complicated gym type equipment. Now that does not mean you cannot join a gym. I am a member of a gym. I go there once or twice. Partly, quite frankly, to get out of the house, to get into an exercise environment. It's good for me. I've got a few friends there, but it is not necessarily because I need their equipment. Now, there are 1 or 2 which can make marginal improvements if you're an advanced trainer. For example, I go in there for some of the equipment that I don't have at home, but I absolutely don't necessarily need them. But they give me marginal gain, but I have been training, so it matters. If you are just starting out, you do not need to go there. In fact, if you are over 60, the likelihood is walking into a gym, and particularly if you have not been training, and particularly when they tout this technique so much, you will feel you're not capable of training in that gym. In fact, you feel intimidated. So that's another friction point. So my advice is train at home to begin with. Follow a program like the Ever Prime program. In fact, if you look at one of the links in the description, there's a 90-day program which we offer, and you can download that. And if you follow that for 90 days, which I did, I just officialized that, I did that, and I transformed my body. Right? You can do that yourself, and you do not need to go to a gym. And your equipment need not be complicated and need not be very expensive. I call it a minimalist home gym. 2 free equipments under £100 sterling or under $150. You will be trained, you'll be fit. Later on, you can go to a gym for whatever reason. If you wanted to use some specialized equipment, or because you're now fitter, there's nothing wrong with that. But you do not need it in the beginning. So, equipment, fancy equipment, ignore it, do not buy it, you don't need it. You don't need an expensive PT, personal trainer. You do not need any of that. So, keep your lifting simple. The next thing they tell you, which is the step 2, they tell you in the fitness industry, you need complicated nutrition. You see menus, you see PDFs, long PDFs, you see files and files of the type of menus, biohacking type of menus, that seaweed, that type of protein, that shake. All that is intended to confuse because somebody wants to sell you a product. Very simply, do not fall for complicated menus. You go for the simple, best bioavailable proteins that are dense, that gives you the protein. Now, you do need protein. You need at least 1 gram per pound of body weight. Otherwise, it's like bringing in the builders to a construction site without having the building materials. They'll be idle. And that's what this is. If you are training and you are not eating the correct protein at the right level, at the right frequency, you are almost wasting your training because you will not be able to build muscle. So that's critical. That's why I started with the lifting, but you do need the protein to be able to build the muscle, because that's the building materials that's required, and the lifting itself is the construction. So do not get too carried away by fancy foods, by fancy health foods. Some people get into a scenario wherein they have to have hundreds or tens of vitamins which they need to take. Now, if you got medication, you're over 60. Most people over 60 tend to have 1 or 2 prescribed medication. Absolutely take it. Please hear me. You have to take your prescribed medication. But beyond that, it's not necessary to have complicated bottles and bottles, jars and jars of well-marketed, sometimes expensive urine minerals or vitamins. You do not need them. All you need, I only take creatine and fish oil, and that's it. And sometimes vitamin D3 during the winter, because I live in a cold climate. Otherwise, I don't even need it because I work out a lot in the sun. So keep it very simple. Make your own assessment and see the ones you are deficient on in terms of vitamins, and make sure you take those. And if you are deficient in several, take all of them. That's not a problem. But do not just be marketed to and spend a lot of money and assume that will be the one that is going to build your body. You do not need that. Right? So keep it very simple. In fact, stick to the 1 gram of 1 pound of body weight and whole single foods only, and then make sure you get your proteins from very good protein sources. In fact, in this channel, we've got a video wherein we rank the protein sources for over 60s. After this video, I encourage you to go and listen to that, because we rank all the protein sources with the top ones at the S tier and then down to the lowest ones at D tier. So that video will appear at the end of this video, or if it doesn't, make sure you go and look for it and listen to it, because that will address what sort of protein you should be having. So that's quite important. In summary, the step 2 after step 1 of lifting, step 2 is eat enough protein and have the right type of protein, and eat it as frequently as necessary, and eat single whole foods and eat fruits and vegetables. And that's all you need. You do not need to biohack. You do not need complicated fancy menus at all. The step 3 in our 1, 2, 3 step is to recover, to rest. Here again, the fitness industry, the health industry, have managed to make this so complicated. Nobody ever in history needed to be taught on how to sleep. Basically, keep it simple. I always say we all have to be a sleep expert. What we need is make sure we do not go for fancy gadgets. I hear about fancy wearables, fancy Oura rings, fancy beds that can do all sorts of gymnastics and all sorts of biohacking. Now, I am not saying things like Oura ring don't work. They do work. I'm not saying if you got some wearables, they will not give you some metrics that you need. If you do need them, have them. What I'm saying is, it's not a prerequisite for you to grow muscle at 60. If you need them because you've assessed your health scenarios and you do need them for a specific need, then get them. But do not just buy multitudes of biohacking equipment, expensive beds, expensive fancy things. You do not need them. What you need is simple, comfortable bed, a dark room, and a very cool room, and block out blue lights. If you can do that and get 7 to 8 hours of sleep every day, you will absolutely have enough time to recover. And if you can do that, as a step 3, having lifted, having eaten the right type of protein, and you do recover in the way I've just described, you do not need any further complications. Anything else could be fine if you've done a needs assessment and you think you need it, or your advisor, your health professional advises you that you need it because you're deficient in it. There is no problem in having it, but do not be sold as a prerequisite for you to grow muscle. So to summarize, you do need to lift, keep it all simple, body weight exercise, no fancy equipment, not obligatory to be a member of a gym, eat enough protein. You don't need a lot of fancy menus, you don't need expensive ingredients, very good protein sources that are bioavailable is all you need, and eat the right quantity at the right frequency. And you do not need to overcomplicate your sleep. Just cool, dark room and avoid blue light before you sleep. If you can do that, you'll absolutely be surprised how simple building muscle is for an over 60. I did this 2 years ago. I am 64 years of age now. 2 years ago, I was 62 years of age. And I was overweight. I had diabetes. I had high blood pressure. I had high cholesterol. I had basically metabolic diseases. Within 2 years, in fact, within 18 months, I reversed everything. And all I did is what I've described here. I transformed my body from 84 kilograms in total body weight to 72 kilograms. In fact, today I'm 71 kilograms. And I also changed my body composition from basically 32% body fat, 23% body fat to 16% body fat. From 23% body fat to 16% body fat. That is a huge drop in fat content. I grew muscle. My FFMI, which is how much muscle you have in your body, also increased. I'm now 21 going 22% FFMI, which is normally, for my age, at the age of 64, is considered elite. So, and I did all this without having to go crazy in the gym, without doing crazy lifts. I did everything at home, and I ate normal protein, and I just did standard recovery I've just recommended here. So, do not overcomplicate fitness if you are over 60. You do not need to. Do not be oversold by the fitness industry. You don't have to. Do not think it's only the gurus, or it's only the specialists, or it's only if something's just been published recently in a scientific paper that helps you. In the past, nobody ever studied scientific papers. In the past, we didn't have gyms. In the past, we didn't have fancy beds. But men grew strong until they were at an old age. That did not require any of the current complicated modern fitness industry fancy gadgets that they've introduced or fancy protocols. All these things are a product of marketing. The industry is bloated. Gurus, experts are all over the place trying to complicate it so that you will think they are the only ones who can actually hold your hand and get you through this and make you fit and gives you what you need. Do not do it. Now let's go.